To my surprise, I found her dressed. She was sitting on the edge of the bed in slacks and T-shirt, and was looking at me as if she could not quite place me. The frank, soft shape of her small breasts were brought out rather than blurred by the limpness of her thin shirt, and this frankness irritated me. She had not washed, yet her mouth was freshly though smudgily painted, and her broad teeth glistened like wine-tinged ivory, or pinkish poker chips. And there she sat, hands clasped in her lap, and dreamily brimmed with a diabolical glow that had no relation to me whatever. I plumped down my heavy paper bag and stood staring at the bare ankles of her sandalled feet, then at her silly face, then again at her sinful feet. "You've been out," I said. The sandals were filthy with gravel. "I just got up," she replied, and added upon intercepting my downward glance, "I went out for a sec. Wanted to see if you were coming back." She became aware of the bananas and uncoiled herself tableward. What special suspicion could I have? None indeed. But those muddy, moony eyes of hers, that singular warmth emanating from her. I said nothing. I looked at the road meandering so distinctly within the frame of the window. Anybody wishing to betray my trust would have found it a splendid lookout. With rising appetite, Lo applied herself to the fruit. All at once I remembered the ingratiating grin of the Johnny next door. I stepped out quickly. All cars had disappeared, except his station wagon. His pregnant young wife was now getting into it with her baby and the other more or less cancelled child. "What's the matter? Where are you going?" cried Lo from the porch. I said nothing. I pushed her softness back into the room and went in after her. I ripped her shirt off, I unzipped the rest of her, I tore off her sandals. Wildly I pursued the shadow of her infidelity. But the scent I travelled upon was so slight as to be practically indistinguishable from a madman's fancy. Gros Gaston, in his prissy way, had liked to make presents just a prissy wee bit out of the ordinary, or so he prissily thought. Noticing one night that my box of chessmen was broken, he sent me next morning, with a little lad of his, a copper case. It had an elaborate oriental design over the lid and could be securely locked. One glance sufficed to assure me that it was one of those cheap money boxes, called for some reason Louisettas, that you buy in Algiers and elsewhere, and wonder what to do with afterwards. It turned out to be much too flat for holding my bulky chessmen, but I kept it, using it for a totally different purpose. In order to break some pattern of fate in which I obscurely felt myself being enmeshed, I had decided, despite Lo's visible annoyance, to spend another night at Chestnut Court. Definitely waking up at 4 in the morning, I ascertained that Lo was still sound asleep, mouth open in a kind of dull amazement at the curiously inane life we all had rigged up for her, and satisfied myself that the precious contents of the Louisetta were safe. There, snugly wrapped in a white woolen scarf, lay a pocket automatic, caliber 32, capacity of magazine 8 cartridges, length a little under 1/9 of Lolita's length, stock checked walnut, finish full blued. I had inherited it from the late Harold Hayes, with a 1938 catalogue which cheerily said in part, "Particularly well adapted for use in the home and car, as well as on the person." There it lay, ready for instant service on the person or persons, loaded and fully cocked with the side lock in safety position, thus precluding any accidental discharge. We must remember that a pistol is the Freudian symbol of the father's central forelimb. I was now glad I had it with me, and even more glad that I had learned to use it 2 years before, in the pine forest around my and Charlotte's Glass Lake. Farlow, with whom I had roamed in these remote woods, was an admirable marksman, and with his 38 actually managed to hit a hummingbird, though I must say not much of it could be retrieved for proof, only a little iridescent fluff. A burly ex-policeman called Krostovsky, who in the 20s had shot and killed 2 escaped convicts, joined us and bagged a tiny woodpecker, completely out of season, incidentally. Between those 2 sportsmen, I, of course, was a novice and kept missing everything, though I did wound a squirrel on a later occasion when I went out alone. "You lie there," I whispered to my lightweight, compact little chum, and then toasted it with a dram of gin.